Hi, I'm Josh, and this is my very late July wrap-up. This was filmed a month ago in mid to early August, but with so much going on, and I ended up forgetting that I had not uploaded it. So this is just to let you know, here it is. I know it's kind of late, but I wanted to go ahead and still include it, so I hope you enjoy. This month, I read 16 books and I DNF'd one. So let's start with the DNF. The first of the month, I did a Independence Day reading vlog that lasted about 5 days. It was initially inspired by this book, which is the second book in the Oxford History series. This is the first book in that series, called The Glorious Cause by Robert Middlekauff. And this is basically about the American Revolution, everything leading up to it. It is amazingly detailed. The problem is I felt the writing was dull and hard to get into. And because it was a reading vlog centered around American Independence Day, I was constrained for time. And I realized halfway through this that I was not retaining the information, that I needed to take it more slowly. So I decided to DNF this. If you saw my Independence Day reading vlog, you'll know I fully intend to read this, because it's a book I really want to read. It's just something I realized I'm going to have to take my time with. It was unfortunate. Now, the two books I did manage to finish, 1776 by David Middlekauff, and this one I enjoyed, but I did not love. I give this 4 stars. It felt like a really good narrative, but it felt like it was overly fluff with limited details, and it ended without really going through the entire American Revolution. It felt like he decided this was where it ended, so we're going to stop here, even though the word didn't really end there. But it was fine, honestly. The one that I absolutely loved, I can't wait to reread, maybe even as soon as Nonfiction November, Say It From the Beginning by Ibram Kendi. I gave this 5 stars, I believe. Clear. When I say I love it, I loved what I got out of it. Obviously, the reading it itself was difficult, and there was a lot of tough topics in there. But from an educational standpoint, you can see my thoughts in the reading vlog, but basically it is a very concise, if long, narrative that outlines the history of racism from the 1600s till now. And the way he's able to outline these evolution of these racist ideas and actions, and still be able to identify how they're so integrated, so fundamentally integrated from all the way back to the 1600s to today. It was amazing. It was amazing writing. It was an amazing amount of detail, but woven in a way that is so well done. It is really accessible, I felt like, and I think it's a fantastic history nonfiction book because of how accessible it is to the reader. Next, I reread the entire Murderbot Diaries series by Martha Wells. That is All Systems Red, Exit Strategy, Rogue Protocol, and Artificial Condition. This is a series that is about a robot who is able to break its governor module, so basically it's able to do whatever it wants, and it basically has freedom. And it is a hilarious, fantastic, accessible sci-fi epic set in the far future. And one thing I didn't notice my first read-through was that our character, even though it's narrated by a masculine-sounding narrator, is never really given a gender. It is just the robot. But I had people comment when I first talked about these, saying that they always interpreted the Murderbot to be, I think, non-binary, which I felt like was something I never realized, but may in fact be what the author was intending. Because it definitely never is given a gender. I just always assumed that the Murderbot was a he, when that was not appropriate. But I absolutely love that series. I gave them pretty much all 5 stars, except for Exit Strategy, which I gave 4.5, which when I read them the first time, I think it was flipped. I gave book 3 4.5 stars, and I gave book 4 5 stars. This year I swapped it, and that was just because of a preference. After rereading them consecutively, I just had a different perspective. Wasn't as good as the rest because it returned to old ideas, and the other ones had such unique storylines. Still a fantastic story though. And all this was leading up to the release of the full-length novel of the 5th book in the series, Network Effect, which is just a continuation of this Murderbot story, and it was fantastic. Each story is so similar to the other, but so distinctly different, and it's just very creative, very well done, and I was so happy to have a full-length novel. Highly recommend that series, one of my favorites. Next, I read another reread, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. This was one that I really struggled with the first time I read it, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and this is about this woman who is a part of a society which is basically dystopia, where we have climate change coming into effect very strongly, and it's basically leading to a destruction of society as we know it, and it requires people to basically break out on their own. In this process, she breaks out, and she slowly starts to accumulate people as she creates this religion of sorts, of her own religion. And I love this book just because, I'm an atheist, and I love this view of this new religion, particularly because it's not really a religion. It's more of a philosophy. It's like God has changed, and change change cannot be avoided, but it can be shaped or something like that. And I love that mentality. I think it's absolutely true. Like we are the ones who shape our future. Sure, the change is inevitable, but it's up to us to decide how that change affects us. And it's one thing I love about the philosophy of this. And I also just loved it a lot more. It's a slow pace book. And I think coming off of this fresh off of Kindred, which is what I read Kindred, then I read this, I had a really hard time connecting with the book because of how slow it was, but then I reread it, and this was easily 5 stars. I want to read it again, honestly. It was so good, and I'm debating whether or not it might be a favorite of mine all time, which I know it seems weird that I would go from like a 3 or 3.5 star to a 5-star favorite, and I think it's just a matter of recognizing that I wasn't in the right headspace when I read it the first time, and I didn't know what to expect, and I don't think I gave it the attention it deserved, or maybe I just wasn't ready to read it, if that makes sense. Next, I read The Relentless Moon by Robinette Kowal, and this is one that I read this twice this month, which I'll get to the second one in a second, but I read this first listening to the audiobook on YouTube as an author narrated it before its release, and she just live streamed the entire process. It's like 50 hours of narration. So it's like an 18-hour audiobook, so it was included all of the mess ups and in between moments, but it was still a really good story, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, obviously. I'll talk more about this in a second. Next, I read The Shadows by Alex North, and this was an e-arc, and I tell you what, did not like this. I think I gave it 2 stars. It just was not for me, but now I'm scared because I'm pretty sure I bought his book from last year that was really popular, whatever it was called. I don't really care that much. Whisper Man, I think it was Whisper Man, and that wasn't for me. Maybe it was just my mindset going into it. I told you that, no I didn't. This is a different video. I'm having trouble with some thrillers. I seem very particular in which thrillers I like, which ones I don't like. And this is one that wasn't for me. First off, I don't love detective stories. Then you tack onto that the fact that it is a supernatural-esque story, but it's one of those stories that it's just not done well. It's like, if you want to walk the line, is it supernatural, is it not? You need to do a better job. To me, if you walk that line poorly, and it's like blatantly obvious that it's not supernatural from the get-go, that was my feelings from the get-go at least, then I think it's just not a good book. It's not good. It's not a good use of the mechanic. It frustrates me beyond end. I don't like it. It feels like a lazy way of trying to create fear while actually doing it. If you want your reader to be afraid, you have to make us believe that it's real. Some of the best books that do that just do it way better. This is one reason why I'm afraid to read Riley Sager's books, because I know they seem to lean heavily on this fear of the supernatural. But I've heard so much praise that I feel better about those, honestly. Next, I read Over the Woodward Wall, and I reread for the second time Sean McGuire's The Middlegame, and oh dear God, I love this. I did an entire reading vlog for both of those. Needless to say, I love them both. 5 stars for Middlegame and 4.5 stars for Over the Woodward Wall. I always confuse it with Wayward. Highly recommend that. Check out the reading vlog. I had so much fun with that. That was when I reread the entire series of the Lady Astronauts series from Robinette Kowal, and this is a book or series about this alternate history where there's an asteroid that impacts with Washington and creates a global-wide climate shift, leading to basically escalated climate change where the world's going to get hot in a matter of decades and we have to get to space to survive. And it follows this one character, this Jewish woman, who is a scientist and engineer and mathematician, who is integral in getting us to space and encouraging women and people of color getting to space as well and having a place in this, because this is a historical fiction book set in the 1950s. This is like alternate history where things are happening in the 1950s, which is amazing just because the 1950s is such a fun time as far as like dialect and some of the non-racist cultural aspects of it. That said, the racism and sexism that she explores in these books, which is honestly one of the best parts about these books, is how well she's able to navigate that, is stuff that is still so prevalent today, and that's one reason why I think it's such a powerful series. The first book won a Hugo Award, which I only have the book 2 and 3 here, but the first one is Loaned to a Friend. I think I give them all 5 stars. If I had to rate them, I'd probably say book 1, then I would say book 3, and then book 2. And honestly, I mentioned before that I read this earlier in the month. I wanted to finish it before I did this reread. I loved it even more the second time. I think part of that was listening to it in the form of a YouTube live narration was a little distracting, and I clearly missed a lot of details. So it was such an amazing novel. And one reason why I loved it too was because it was a new perspective. It wasn't the same perspective as book 1 and 2, and I loved the new character. But for more of that, you can watch my Reading Rush vlogs. Also read in the Reading Rush was Hidden Figures by Margot Shetterly. And this one I gave 4 stars. I was a little iffy with this just because I didn't think the writing was all that great. But one thing I did love about it was the main character we focus on for the most part, which is Katherine Johnson, and her drive and passion and love for space and math was something that I could really connect to, and I really loved that aspect of the story. And overall, I think it was a story that needed to be told. I don't think it was the best writing in my opinion, but still a book that I thoroughly enjoyed and connected with. And those are all the books that I read this month. I am curious if any of you have read these books. If so, what did you think of them? If you had any disagreements with me on your rating. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day and hope you stay safe.